First, you can follow along with us on Direction Kickoff page. You will notice videos and issues for almost everything we're going to talk about today. Second, you will notice a feedback link here. It's a really short survey. It will take you less than 2 minutes, and we encourage everybody to participate so we can make this process better for everyone involved. Third, I want to remind you that predictability is the last item under velocity for us. So we prioritize velocity over predictability, which means many of the things we talk about today may not make it into 13.6, but we really try to make them in that 13.6 timeframe. And fourth, you will notice that usability and improvements in user experience to drive monthly active users is higher over ISEV drivers and dog fooding. This was a significant change we made about 2 months ago, and we are seeing very significant movement in how we prioritize internally. With that, I'm going to lay out the sequence today. So we'll start off with the dev section led by Eric, who will cover manage, plan, and create stage, followed by Kenny, who's the leader of the ops section and will cover verify, package, release, configure, and monitor stage, followed by secure and defend section. David is not participating today, but Sam Kerr will take the lead here and talk about the secure and defend stage. And finally, Josh will cover the enablement stage, including geo and search. With that, take it away, Eric.
All right, thanks, Anoop. I'll go ahead and share my screen and get started. All right, so as always, in the dev section, we have grouped some of our items into themes, and we've got 2 big themes for today. The first theme is new or competitive features, and then the second theme is usage and usability. And so we'll go ahead and get started. And the first thing I want to highlight is that we're finally going to focus and ship an MVC on what we're calling Saml group sync. So if you're using Saml to map your users and have them log into GitLab, we don't have a great way for syncing permissions between those 2 systems right now. And so what we're going to do is allow an administrator to set up a mapping between your SSO provider and gitlab.com. And then once that user logs in, they'll be mapped appropriately with the correct permissions, and then those permissions will be synced periodically to ensure that if there's changes on either side, that they get mapped and propagated appropriately. So really excited for this. This is a really highly requested feature, especially for those enterprises that really need to have very strict and tight access control around resources inside of GitLab. The second thing that we're going to ship is a SHA-specific chain of custody report. A few releases ago, we shipped a chain of custody report that exports all merge requests. But what we found through feedback is that oftentimes users that are using this feature really just care about a specific commit SHA. And so what we're going to do is provide the ability to copy and paste in a specific commit SHA and then export that chain of custody report showing what happened around that specific commit. We're also going to figure out what a merge request review could look like inside of VS Code. If you remember, a few releases ago, we took on official support of a VS Code extension. And so what this will look like is basically two use cases: as a reviewer inside of VS Code, and then as a contributor or as a merge request author. So as a reviewer, we want you to be able to view your branches through VS Code without actually checking out the branch, submit comments back to the MR author, and then have those comments propagate back to the GitLab application as well. And then as a contributor, or as an MR author, we want you to be able to access that feedback right inside of VS Code in context so that you can make changes and respond to those comments as well. And then, of course, we'll also propagate all of those comments back into the GitLab application so you have a consistent experience no matter where you're looking at that merge request, either inside of VS Code or inside of the GitLab interface. And then our last big new feature is our Gitly cluster variable replication factor. We've been working on this for quite some time, but basically this is the ability to set a variable replication factor for a specific repository and have it replicated that many times throughout your Gitly cluster. This will really help to manage storage cost so that you can have a big Gitly cluster, but have a specific number of replication factors that are variable dependent on how important or how fault tolerant a specific repository needs to be. So this should really help some of our larger customers with large repositories and lots of Git storage help manage their Gitly cluster cost. Our second theme, usage and usability, and I'll just go ahead and dive right in. Last release, we made a change to the user sign-up flow for self-managed instances where you can request a user and then an admin has to approve you on the backside in order for you to have access to that. Rather than just turning sign up off and having admins invite people, we thought this was a great balance of making the sign up discoverable while also having admins have control over that process. And we're going to go ahead and just make that the default for new instances because we just feel like it's the right balance of sign up and control. And then we're going to make a few improvements to it. So we're going to provide an email to the user when they get approved. And then we're going to provide an email to admins when a user has requested an account so that it would really shorten the time between when a user is requesting an account and when they can get access into the GitLab instance. One other really nice improvement we're going to make is we're going to separate the new group and project creation button out from one another. It's often really hard to find where you need to click to make a new subgroup. And you actually have to do it via this dropdown right next to new project. It's not very intuitive. So we're just going to separate that out. You can see the mockup here so that if you want to make a new subgroup, you can very easily right there on the group overview page. In merge request analytics, which is a great feature to help you understand your average project throughput and how many merge requests per engineer you're shipping, we're also going to add a new container on that graph, which is the mean time to merge. So you can understand the average amount of time between an MR opened and an MR merged for your team's throughput. And then we're also going to iterate on iterations. Our iterations feature is the feature that allows a lot of our agile teams to manage their sprints inside of GitLab. And we want to allow the iterations to be more tightly coupled together with our issue boards feature. So we're going to allow you to make an iteration issue board list. And that'll look pretty similar to making any other list inside of the product, like a label, assigning milestone. Be right here, iteration, so be able to make a board list based on that iteration. We're also going to make an improvement to scope a board to the current iteration. Now, the way the feature works, you can only have one iteration be current at a time. So it's just a simple checkbox to scope your board to the current iteration, which allows you to filter your board and then check that box to just understand the issues that are in that iteration. We're going to make one more small but important improvement to the board list as well, which is to remove the board's upsell list. This is a column that you get when you are a free user and you go to the boards for the first time. We ask you to upgrade your plan. It looks really poor. It's a bad experience. It doesn't lead to a great outcome for either GitLab or the user. So we're going to remove that and make that experience much better. And then one last very exciting feature, we're going to allow you to search for your full name when you're mentioning someone in an issue or merge request comment. Right now, you really have to know someone's GitLab handle to mention them in one of those comment boxes, which is not a consistent experience with other places where you search for users like the assignee list. So this is a really, really great improvement. So you don't have to memorize someone's GitLab alias to tag them in an issue or MR comment. Our source code group is also focused on two really nice improvements. This release in GitLab 13.5, which is going to happen in 3 days, we're releasing our first class reviewer object in merge requests, which is going to allow you to assign a reviewer in the merge request sidebar. This improvement will display which approval rules match a given reviewer. So you can very easily understand who to assign that to from a reviewer perspective in order to get your MR approved and ultimately merged. And then we're also going to provide a nice improvement to multi-line merge request comments, which is the ability to click and drag your cursor over the block that you want to comment on. So this will look something like this, which is a much more intuitive experience than you have today to provide a multi-line comment. 3 other things I want to highlight very quickly. We recently moved navigation and settings ownership into the dev section. So we're going to work on 2 small but very important improvements there. The first one is we're going to persist frequently used groups and projects in your top navigation across devices. So these are the boxes here that you would select based off of what you've recently accessed, but it doesn't persist across devices. We're going to fix that. And then we also have some improvements to make that work a little bit better that we'll schedule in the future. The second one is we have a whole bunch of really amazing features inside of GitLab, but sometimes a specific group or project is used for a very specific use case. And we want to have the ability to remove left sidebar navigation menu items based off of your use case. You can already do this today for some menu items, but not all. So this epic is essentially making that experience consistent for all menu items. And then our last item I want to highlight is that we're going to make some really nice UX improvements to our Jira Connect app. Our Jira Connect app is the application that's shipped with GitLab that connects your gitlab.com projects or namespaces to your Jira project. And right now, our success rate for installation is rather poor. There's probably a few reasons for that, but one of them is that our experience is actually rather bad. Our error messages are rather bad, and we don't provide a great way to actually help you select your namespaces to connect in that application. So we're going to provide that and make that experience better, and hopefully drive that success rate up with respect to linking your Jira and GitLab instances together. As always, there's a ton more coming from the dev section. Check out our direction pages, the kickoff page, and let me know if you have any questions on anything. And with that, I'll send it over to Kenny.
Awesome, thanks, Eric. So many cool and exciting improvements. As a heavy user of GitLab, I'm excited about the finding by last name, and even the one about groups and projects is just a cognitive load that I'd never even realized I was carrying. So super excited about all those items. Thanks, Eric. I'm gonna share my screen. My name is Kenny Johnston. I'm covering the ops section, covers 5 stages, 9 product groups. As Anoop and Eric have mentioned, tons of really exciting features that are in the individual groups videos. Please check those out. I'm super excited to share just a small sliver of the items that I'm excited about in 13.6, covering 3 key themes. First theme is usage and usability, and I'm going to cover 2 very highly popular issues from the verify stage. Let me jump to the first one. I'm going to start actually in our docs. So if you're a user of GitLab CI, you may have jobs that include a before or after script, or maybe use it in your default job. This enables you to run a specific script after the completion of a job. But if you notice in our description in the docs, it says if the job fails, we'll run the script, or if it completes, we'll run the script. But if it's times out or cancels, we won't. So in 13.6, we're going to be adding the support for if a job is canceled or timed out in your pipeline, we will ensure that that after script runs. Super useful feature that ensures completion of, like, maybe there's a cleanup task in one of your jobs that you need to ensure gets executed, regardless of the result of the pipeline or the result of the job. The second really highly requested issue is actually also, I'm going to start with the docs. If your job fails, if the script in your job fails with anything other than an exit code of 0, we consider that a failed job and present it as such in your pipeline view. In 13.6, we're going to be able to allow you to configure what error codes result in what output from that job specifically. So you can define which ones result in success, warning, or canceled. Right here in your GitLab CI YAML. Again, this is another highly requested issue that makes the usage of GitLab CI and the definition of that in your YAML file a lot easier for our users. The second theme I want to walk through is about new markets. And the first issue I want to talk about is deployment traffic weighting. So if you use GitLab to manage your releases, especially to Kubernetes or container-based applications or environments, you can set the weight of how you want to do a canary or a blue-green deploy in your YAML file in a job definition. And we have predefined auto-deploy templates that allow you to do kind of incremental canary-based rollouts. And what we haven't allowed you to do is manage that not in YAML, in the UI directly. And so in 13.6, we're going to be adding the ability to configure directly in the UI in this kind of integrated place where you're looking at the specific environment and can see which pods are in Canary versus successfully running the stable branch, and alter the weight right here in your UI. And we'll obviously confirm that that's in fact what you want to do before doing it. But it's a super cool way for us to continue to evolve our capabilities around advanced deployments, which allow you to more progressively and more rapidly deploy your application to production. The next new market item that I wanted to talk about is in our monitor stage. And this is about enabling you to continue to bring your alerts to GitLab so that you can then do incident management and incident response in GitLab alongside the same application that stores who wrote your code, what pipelines were run, et cetera. Really powerful capability to have these 2 components integrated. And in 13.6, we're going to be adding the ability to configure multiple alert ingestion endpoints or integrations within GitLab. We'll have some standard ones like Prometheus and Opsgenie, but also you'll be able to configure the HTTP endpoint for any external service, including being able to map the specific GitLab keys to the payload of that alert. This is really important for organizations, large organizations who have existing alert infrastructure and want to send those alerts so that they can triage the alerts and then create incidents from them right within their GitLab UI where their developers and operators are already interacting. The final theme that I want to chat through is about single platform, and I'm going to give a couple of examples that really showcase the difference that having a single application makes. And the first one is this fairly innocuous issue about making sure that when you create review apps in child pipelines, that those show up in the merge request that was triggered by the parent pipeline. Seems fairly straightforward, but if you think about if you were using separate tools other than GitLab to manage both something unique like review apps that is unique to GitLab, but also your pipelines, it would take multiple release cycles from both of those tools for there to be a handy integration so that you could have, when your pipeline was generating in a kind of child pipeline environment, a review app that gets spit out into a merge request wherever you're doing your merge request. This is the kind of thing that we can easily fix because we have a single application, because we have a single data store, and because we're approaching it from the perspective of users who are using a single tool. And then the second one that I really want to highlight is our Terraform state file display. So in GitLab, in the last couple of releases, you've been able to attach your GitLab Terraform state to GitLab and have GitLab manage that state. The way you manage that is through GitLab tools like merge requests and pipelines. And so when we're displaying that current status of the state, we get to showcase a lot of cool things like what was the most recent pipeline that affected this managed Terraform state file, this definition of your infrastructure. What is the recent commits and branch that did that? Who are the triggers of that pipeline? All of these kinds of things are about bringing a single view of this artifact known as your Terraform state, your infrastructure state, all under one roof so everyone can see the interconnected ways in which that has been adjusted recently. So those are two really great examples of the value of a single platform that I'm really excited to showcase. With that, I will hand it over to Sam to talk about secure and defend.
All right, thanks so much, Kay. Sounds like there's a lot of great stuff coming up in Ops. I'm really excited about the build status and the exit code customization. And so for those who don't know me, I'm Sam Kerr. I'm Principal Product Manager here at GitLab. And today I'm going to talk to you about secure and defend, some of the things we're focusing on that we hope to ship in 13.6, as well as some of the things that we're focusing on doing our design and some foundational work for. But really, the themes that we're focusing on are usability, making sure our product is easy for you to use and get value out of, as well as the single application, because using everything in the same place gives you more value. And so with that in mind, let's take a look at the first thing. And that is we're going to be improving the MR experience for users that are on core and still want to use scanners like SAST. And so we know that today it's difficult to go through and click all of the different artifact downloads one at a time. So what we're going to do going forward is put all of those results in a single place in your merge request widget. You only have to do a single click. You'll get all those artifacts all at once, saving you a ton of time. We're also going to be improving the experience in terms of configuring security scanning for core users that aren't on Ultimate. We know it's hard to get started. You have to add things to your CI files. And so what we're going to do is enable the configuration screen for security and compliance for all users going forward. And if you click into that, if you're a core user, you're going to see this enable via merge request button. This is going to help you walk through the steps needed to add SaaS to your applications. And again, save you a whole bunch of time, save you some of those friction points with having to do all of this manually by yourself. With DAS, we're really going to be focusing this release on reducing the number of false positives that you have to manually manage. We've heard it be said that a single false positive can be reported many different times, and you have to go through and click each one individually. What we're going to be doing to help make that easier to deal with is actually grouping those all into a single item. So even if a finding is reported 10 different times, you only have to click one time to dismiss it or resolve it or do whatever you want to do with that finding rather than doing it 10 times. For fuzz testing, we're going to be focusing on resymbolicating our crash results. And I know that's a scary sounding word, but what it really means is just making the results human readable. What you would see today from your fuzzing crash results is a stack trace like this. It's not going to be easily understandable and actionable, but we're going to be making this human readable by adding things like the file name and the file line number directly into those crash results. your devs can immediately see where the problem is and start taking the next actionable step to fix it. We're also going to be working on implementing what we call our fuzzing Corpus Registry. Today, you have to manage your Corpus objects directly in your Git repo, which is time consuming and difficult. So I'm showing a prototype of how we plan to address this, where this Corpus Registry will actually house all of the Corpus objects attached to your project. You'll be able to see their names, different pieces of metadata about them. You can download them to look at them locally or delete them. You can also add a new one and take all of those Corpus files that you have locally on your machine, zip them up, and upload them with one click. We're also focused on enabling OpenAPI v3 support with this release as well. Today, we support v2 OpenAPI or Swagger files for API fuzzing. And so we want to make sure that if you have a v3 file, you can use that file directly going forward, rather than having to either downgrade or make the decision not to use API fuzz testing. One of the other things we're focusing on this release is some design work around how you could link Jira and GitLab's vulnerability management systems together. So going forward, what you'll start to see is a bar down here at the bottom of each individual vulnerability object with related Jira issues. You'll be able to create a link between those two systems. And so in this example, we see sec123 here is linked to this GitLab vulnerability, so that regardless of the type of processes you have in place, you'll be able to use both systems more effectively together. In a similar vein, we know that users can get vulnerabilities reported from places besides our own scanner, such as from a user manually finding something or a third-party penetration test. And so we're working on figuring out how we can best allow you to manually enter those vulnerabilities into GitLab. A concept design that I'm showing here right now will allow you to add description information, give it a name, add various pieces of metadata, so that you can manage these vulnerabilities just like you would any of the other results that you'll get from GitLab's own scanning. And so those are the high-level things that we're focusing on with Secure in this coming iteration. So I want to switch gears and talk a little bit more about Defend now. And so one of the things we've learned from working with customers and users with Defend is that it can be difficult to find the individual results that all of our sensors are reporting. So we're going to be starting to work towards what we call the project level alert dashboard to help you understand and more easily manage all of those findings. I've got a small demo application here. This is a concept demo where the various GitLab sensors will report results. They'll be immediately shown this unreviewed column rather than in a very long log file. Your team can then look at those results and mark them as under review. They can confirm them if there's an actual issue, and ultimately we'll be able to mark them as resolved and not an issue to your project anymore. And so those are the things that we're going to be focusing on with Secure and Defend in 13.6. Love to hear your feedback. And with that, I will pass it to Josh.
Thanks, Sam. Some great features. So I'd like to talk about the highlights that we're working on here in 13.6 for enablement, and we grouped them into a few themes. Let's jump in with features and customer requests here. And the big one that we're working on in this area is supporting deploying GitLab server on Openshift. We are working on a few issues here. The two big tracks we're working on, number one is validating that we can use the Helm chart as the inners of the operator to leverage much of that learning we have over the past few years of deploying GitLab and Kubernetes and proving that out, as well as also taking an image or two and submitting them for certification to Red Hat. Both of these will allow us to better understand the scope of effort in front of us and better then schedule the following iterations after this. So some two key tracks there to kind of reduce risk on Openshift. Next up, we are working to introduce a read-only mode for Geo. The key here is that sometimes you, of course, want to have a failover between your primary and your secondary. And so to do this, you want to make sure that your secondary has all the content of your primary. And it can take a minute or two, depending on the latency between the two instances, for that to happen. And so we want to go ahead and allow an admin to set a primary into read-only mode, allow all of that replication to finish, and then promote the secondary. This is particularly important if your primary is degraded for some reason and might not be performing as well as you'd hoped. We'll automate this likely in the future, but for now we want to introduce it as a CLI option so that you can address this use case in a smaller iteration. Rounding out the feature request here, we are also working to finish up the effort to break out LDAP credentials into and out of the GitLab RB configuration file. This is the common configuration file. We want to move secrets out of it. And so this will help us and our customers better achieve compliance approvals when using their GitLab server in a self-managed state. And so this is an important aspect for them to help pass those compliance audits. Finally, we can transition over to usage and usability. And so let's jump into the first item here, primarily on the usability front. We have rolled out dynamic imagery sizing for all of GitLab.com to significant improvement for the overall performance and page weight. And we want to bring this to self-managed as well. The challenge we have is that we don't have a caching layer here today. And most self-managed instances don't have a CDN to help offload some of that for ourselves. And so we'd be essentially recomputing the size of every image on demand. And so we want to either understand the performance implications of if that's acceptable, or alternatively, better recommend users to configure a CDN going forward. We're also working to remove one more kind of item on the to-do list for admins by automatically re-indexing the database indexes. And this will allow databases to continue to perform well over time, reduce their overall size and bloat, and again, reduce one more manual action that customers have today to run GitLab as best as it possibly can. We're also working to help reduce the overall memory consumption of GitLab to overall help performance of the service. And we're working on this in two primary ways right now. The first one is we're looking to load more of our shared libraries before we go ahead and fork the processes. This will allow us to share more of that shared libraries and reduce the overall memory consumption as we continue to grow the number of processes to handle an increased number of requests. And similarly with that, we're also looking to take advantage of the Ruby 2.7 improved garbage collection system, which will also help to ensure we can continue to share more of that memory going forward as the process lives and processes requests. So these work in tandem to provide a good experience for our users. Last, I'd like to touch on the single platform improvements we're making as well. And the key one here is that we are working towards adding or really shifting much of the filtering options in search over to the left-hand sidebar. So we've been working on adding things like filtering on status and confidentiality. And right now they're kind of a second row here underneath issues and merge requests and things like that. And we'll shift them down to left faceting to provide a more modern feel. And it'll give you more control in searching and exploring what you're looking for across all the content that's indexed on GitLab. So really excited about this. And we're also looking to continue to add additional filtering options here in the near future as we look to move more and more of this over to left-hand rail faceting as opposed to having these tab views up top. So that's the highlights here for enablement. I'll have to pass it back to Anoop to take us home.
Thank you, Josh. 13.6 is shaping up to be an amazing release. It's a highlight of my month to do these kickoff calls. As always, we encourage everyone to take the survey if you can to help us improve, engage with us on the issues, and of course, contribute code and improvements as you